Officials in Moscow say hundreds of Ukrainian drones have targeted the city in what appears to be the largest attack on the Russian capital so far in the war. 3 people are reported to have been killed and at least 20 injured. Russia's defense ministry said it shot down 337 drones aimed at Moscow and 9 other regions. Apartment buildings were among the buildings hit, along with a railway line. 4 airports were forced to close. Ukraine has yet to comment. It came ahead of talks being held today in Saudi Arabia, where US and Ukrainian officials are discussing the route to a possible ceasefire. Our correspondent in Kiev, James Waterhouse, says Ukraine has made no comment on the attack carried out in Russia last night.
Well, you'll never hear anything official when these attacks are carried out by Ukraine. It seems to be an unprecedented scale of attack, where drones typically manufactured inside Ukraine were used on up to 9 provinces, according to Russian officials. More than 300 were intercepted, we are told, including more than 70 in the capital, Moscow. And for Ukraine, the goal of these attacks is to bring this war, Russia's invasion, to the doorsteps of those Russians who may choose to turn a blind eye or who may not be aware of exactly what is going on. And the timing is also pertinent because it, as you say, an aerial ceasefire, a pausing on drone attacks, is something Ukraine is proposing in these peace talks in Saudi Arabia.
James Waterhouse reporting there. Well, our State Department correspondent Tom Bateman is travelling with a US delegation in Jeddah. I asked him for a sense of the atmosphere there ahead of those crucial talks.
Well, it's certainly pretty positive, actually, the mood among the Americans here in Jeddah. In the last few moments, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, walked past me just here on his way into the meeting with the Ukrainians. I asked him for his expectations for it. He gave a thumbs up and said it'll be good. Now, on the way in to Jeddah, he spoke to us on the plane, saying that what they're trying to do here is establish the Ukrainians' intentions, and basically they were unhappy that they felt the Ukrainians weren't committed to President Trump's plans for a quick truce with the Russians. And I think this is basically about trying to see if, as far as the Americans are concerned, the Ukrainians are serious about this. Now, also on the way in, I spoke to Andrei Yermak, a top advisor to President Zelensky, who was in that meeting, and asked him also what his expectations were. He talked about the meeting in a very constructive sense. He said they were open to their American partners. They wanted to see what the proposals could be for getting to a ceasefire. That's exactly the kind of language I think that President Trump wants to hear. But I put that crucial question to him also about what had always been the big sticking point, was that President Zelensky's fear was that all of this was being kind of stitched together too quickly, a rapprochement with the Russians, but without any mechanism to police a ceasefire, without a security guarantee from the Americans that would deter President Putin from just sort of coming back in and reinvading in a year or two's time into this any sort of truce process. And now I asked again Mr. Yermak about that this morning, and he said that, yes, of course they want a security guarantee, but he suggested this wouldn't be what they were pushing hard today, but more about, getting to the start of a process and assuring the Americans basically that they are on board with what Mr. Trump wants.
So, Tom, what are the likely outcomes from today's talks?
Well, I think, the Americans seem pretty upbeat. I think they feel that this is a sort of opportunity. They wouldn't put it in these terms, but this is basically what's happening here, for a reprieve for Mr. Zelensky after he was ejected from the White House, told that he was ungrateful and disrespectful by Mr. Trump and the Vice President J.D. Vance. Of course, the Americans then cut off or suspended military assistance and intelligence sharing with the Ukrainians. Now, Mr. Rubio, again, I asked him about that, about the security, about the military assistance. Would that be put back online basically as a result of today's meeting? He very much suggested that if things went well, if there was a positive outcome, that they hope to have an announcement to make. So I think we should watch out for the restoration of that support by the Americans to Ukraine.
Tom Bateman in Jeddah there. Well, for more on the attack on Moscow overnight, let's speak to our reporter Lisa Vogt from the BBC Russian service. She joins me now from Berlin. So the latest we're hearing is that a third person has been killed following this attack. What are the latest developments?
Yes, so the attack that we saw this night was the largest drone attack at Russia that Ukraine has launched since Russia started its invasion 3 years ago, and a total of 337 drones, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, were downed over Russia this night. And as you said, at least 3 persons have been killed in the attack. And there are many more injured, at least 18 injured in Moscow region, including little kids. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said that Tuesday was the biggest Ukrainian drone attack on the Russian capital. So some people are now staying at hospitals. Regional authorities showed pictures of damaged buildings, burned cars, damaged property. Some civilians had to be evacuated from their homes because of the fires that those drones started. And we know that biggest Moscow airports had to suspend all their flights during the night, but by now they have resumed their operations.
And just tell us about some of the reaction coming in from Russian officials.
Well, Vladimir Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, said that what we saw this night can definitely hurt potential attempts to start direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine to end the war in Ukraine. And of course, it's especially important given the meeting that you just discussed that's happening in Saudi Arabia right now. Right now, head of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe is actually in Moscow. And we know that officials from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs showed him the aftermath of this drone attack. So far, I would say that the reaction is mostly focused on, recovery efforts, on helping the injured, on counting the losses. But generally, what we saw this night was met with a very harsh rhetoric from the Russian officials. And we, of course, know, I think it's important to mention that Ukraine also, even though top Ukrainian officials, they has not publicly commented on what happened. They also reported drone attacks on Kyiv right now. So we can definitely see that despite all those diplomatic efforts that we see, the fighting is still going on, and this war is still happening both in Russia and Ukraine.
Lisa Vogt from the BBC Russian service, thank you for bringing us all those details.